Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
Welcome to NHL Wraparound and happy summer, everyone. Vic Morren along with Neil Smith. And this kicks off, Neil, our fifth franchise. It's called the Celebrity Series. And one more franchise for us, and we're going to be the 1967 expansion.
Yeah, and we can be the Toronto Maple Leafs and be the last one to win the Cup in the original six and still haven't won it almost 100 years later. So we don't want to hold that record.
No, we don't. Well, we're going to try to do about 3 or 4 of these celebrity shows before the new season starts. But before we bring our guest in, when we did our last show about 3 weeks ago, I ended the show wearing the coral Hawaiian shirt. I took a lot of ridicule for that. And I think the one thing we can agree upon is that our guest will look good in any shirt.
He will look good in any shirt, and as will any other guest as compared to that shirt that you had on. But I think it's time now to turn to bring in our very first celebrity guest ever on NHL Wraparound, Bobby Valentine of baseball legend. And Bob, thanks for coming on and doing this. We know you're on the bike, getting a little bit of exercise in before you look after a lot of young, hopeful baseball players.
Hi, Neil. Great to be with you guys. I'm in beautiful Stamford, Connecticut at my sports academy and getting a little sweat going before I go down to the New York Met LA Angels game, afternoon game at beautiful Citi Field. Yeah.
Well, we know who you'll be cheering for in that game because we know where your loyalty has to be with the Angels. Bobby, I want to say that on our cover art for this show that goes out all over the place with the podcast is a picture of you kneeling down at Shea Stadium with your manager's uniform on with the Stanley Cup. And do you remember that at all from back in 1994?
Yeah. Sure. I had just taken over, I think, as the Met manager. And that could have been it. Or I was there because my buddy Doug Romano grabbed the cup and he drank out of it in the clubhouse after the victory. And the cup was going around. And that's a cool club. You saw that, huh? That's pretty good of you, Coach. Way to go.
Well, that's my partner that's got the eagle eye to grab these things. You know what, though, Vic? Maybe it was a Devil's Cup. We never even thought of that. Could it possibly have been one of Lou's cups? Because we're going to get into the whole Lou Lamoriello, Bobby Valentine thing.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm thinking it was a Ranger Cup. Was it in the? I'm not sure. Tony Amati was a very good friend of this Doug Romano, who's the son of my partner in the restaurant business that I had for 38 years in Stamford and all around the country. And the cup showed up and I got to take a picture with it. I didn't kiss it and I didn't drink out of it, but I was there with it, no doubt about it.
Well, if it was Lou's, it certainly gives us a good open here because you were coached by Lou Lamoriello in the Cape Cod League in 1967. And the style that you saw from Lou coaching you, how do you see that having moved over to his time in Providence, and then his GM of the Devils? Was the style the same back then as we've come to know it in hockey circles decades later?
Yeah, unless people read Lou's biography. Lou was a baseball player at heart. The hockey coach and baseball coach at Providence College, played in the Cape Cod League, then played in the Pan Am League, I believe, up in Canada when he was like 23 or 24, and then came back to the Cape, and I was a 17-year-old junior in high school. He came down to Stamford, Connecticut because the assistant basketball coach at Providence College and he were friends. And the assistant basketball coach, was from Stamford, Connecticut. So while they were there, they saw a baseball game. He went over to my mom and dad and said, "Hey, your kid's pretty good. How about having him come with me to Cape Cod?" And just for the record, in 1967, my mom and dad weren't, first generation Italians. I don't know if they could spell Cape Cod, and definitely didn't know where it was. But I set out to spend the summer in Yarmouth on the Cape. And Lou was really disciplined then, as he was throughout his entire career. Hell, he didn't let me ride in the trunk of Buddy Pippen's car because, when we went to road games, the cars were crowded, and I used to get in the trunk to go up to the next town. And he found that out and said, "Oh, no, you can't do that." And so I said, "Okay, Lou, I'll never do it again," until the next day. Yeah.
When you look at how a hockey team is run, and of course you've run many baseball teams between the Texas Rangers, the New York Mets, Boston Red Sox for a year, and you also had two stints over in Japan. Would you say that there are any similarities or very vast differences in terms of how a baseball team has to be run in terms of dealing with athletes and hockey players?
Well, baseball's the everyday grind, and hockey gets a little chance to put ice on their bruise in between at times. But I think that the idea of respect and respect of the opposition as well as your teammates, I think organization, so that people know what to do, when to do, and what's expected of them. I think the idea of being accountable on the ice is just as important as being accountable on the diamond. So there are a lot of similarities. And the only thing is, I don't think baseball players like to drink as much as hockey players. But I think that's a Canadian thing, isn't it?
It certainly is. So tell us, how did you end up going to Japan? That's an interesting diversion, and I know you're still very popular in Japan.
Matter of fact, I'm going to Cooperstown. The Hall of Fame induction of Ichiro is this weekend, and there's a great exhibit, a new exhibit up there, which traces the U.S.-Japan relationship in baseball from like 1934 when Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and others went to Japan to do an exhibition, and their professional game began. And, through the years, to Otani and Ichiro and the great players of Japan that are here today. So, I did a stint in Texas where I was 7-year manager of the Texas Rangers. George W. Bush came in. I got to work with him for 3.5 years. And then one day he decided to make a change, and I think it was a good idea. And I was there long enough, and it was time to move on. So I moved on to AAA with the New York Mets. While I was there, one of the great players of Japan, who became a manager later in his life and then became a general manager later in his life, was chosen to go around America for a year and look at professional teams and minor league teams and college teams to figure out who could be the first non-Japanese to manage in the professional league in Japan. And he was pretty astute, and he found me. I don't know how the hell that happened, but it was a blessed occurrence. I went over there with bells on. I went over there bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I was going to teach everyone everything they needed to know about baseball, and I wound up learning a whole lot while I was trying to teach a whole lot. So it was a fun and rewarding experience.
You would mention that you're going to be at the Hall of Fame induction for Ichiro Suzuki, and of course the lineage of Japanese baseball goes back, as you'd said, all the way to the 1930s when Babe Ruth visited, and of course we know about Sadahara O, and you'd mentioned Shohei Otani. But when you were over there, could you have ever dreamed that we would see a Japanese player that could pitch, that could hit for power? I mean, this is a truly generational talent. And from your time in Japan, could you have ever foreseen a player of Japanese descent so spectacular in the major leagues?
Well, there were a lot of spectacular players. I didn't know if they could actually, do the acclimation and eat this food and drive in this traffic and learn a new language and all that good stuff. While I was there the first time, spectacular players like Ochi, and I won't bore you with some of the names, but they always had good players. It's just that, Japan was a closed society and they weren't really up for change and different and all that good stuff. I think when Nomo came here, I went there. And so Nomo was that first real player to play in the major leagues. When he threw a no-hitter and I won a championship, people started thinking, hey, maybe this kind of cross-section works. But I never imagined anyone like Otani. I mean, Otani's the best athlete in a baseball uniform I have ever seen on either side of the Pacific Oceans. I did draft a guy there, though, back in 2004. No, in 2006. And I wanted him to be a two-way player. He was a first baseman, left-handed hitter. He's a left-handed pitcher. He threw about 95 miles an hour. Just after we gave the bonus and he drank a lot of beer, he decided he really wasn't into putting in the work that it needed to be a two-way player. And it's tough. It's really tough what this guy is doing.
A little side note that my partner ran down for me to bring up to you was in Japan, not only did the attendance double for the Marines, but you actually were hosting dance classes for female fans.
Yeah, not actually for ballroom dancing. I taught the cha-cha to the community of Chiba that I worked in, and I did it before games. When the other team was having batting practice, we set up a stage outside. Partner dancing wasn't quite in the part of the recipe for the secret sauce of Japan. And so they heard I was an international ballroom dance champion when I was young. And they said, hey, can you teach it? And I said, I can teach it. And it was pretty cool. As a matter of fact, before the national anthem on the field one day, I did a complete exhibition in a tuxedo with a gal in a full ballroom dance dress. And they set up the stage. I did the cha-cha. I went inside during the national anthem. I changed from one costume into another costume and came out in time to manage the game. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
That is great.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that the Japanese society was somewhat closed and a little bit reluctant to change, and the things that I think we take for granted here, kids running the bases and autograph sessions and just really opening up the country to the way that we do things here in North America. And I think that only had to enhance your popularity while you were over there, in addition to winning a championship in the Japanese league.
Yeah, well, when I went back in 2005, you remember we didn't always do things that way in America. The baseball and the players weren't always fan friendly, but then there was the strike in '95, and then the fans got turned off, and the players and the business of baseball decided they had to do something a little different. So they started to allow kids on the field to run the bases, and they started giving out more autographs, and we created a fan-friendly atmosphere in Major League Baseball. And I brought that idea over to Japan, and it was received well.
So I want to jump back. You come back to North America, and I know that you have been asked this 1,000,001 times, maybe more, but I'm going to come at this from a little bit different perspective. And I'm talking about the whole disguise in June of 1999. And you guys had an 8-game losing streak. And I'm going to ask you, because I was an umpire at one time, and I probably should have gone on and gotten carded after, because admittedly, I was actually quite good at it. And
that's an oxymoron. A good umpire, that's an oxymoron, Vic.
Well, nonetheless, one of the things that I had learned was that I believe that there were 8 different ways to balk, and the catcher's balk was one of them. And I actually went back and I looked at the play last night. And does the rule make any more sense to you now than it does then? Because that's what prompted the ejection from Randy Marsh when Piazza stepped outside of the catcher's box before Pat Mahomes threw the pitch.
Wow, you got them all right. That's pretty cool. Exactly. Yeah. Pat Mahomes pitching. That's the father of Patrick Mahomes. Mike Piazza, the Hall of Famer, catching, me managing. I gave a pitch out, and he stepped out of the box before Pat released the ball. No doubt about it. And they called the catcher's balk, and I had read about it for years. I'd never seen it called. And,
Yeah.
when I asked Randy what he was calling, he told me what he was calling, and then I said, well, you can't throw me out for what I'm thinking, can you? And he said no, and then I told him what I was thinking, and he threw me out. Yeah. And it was a weird thing. Yeah, we lost 8 in a row. The general manager, excuse me, Neil, but the general manager stepped in, fired 3 of my coaches as though they were the problem instead of the players that he brought in for me to manage. It was a real shit show, yeah. And during the press conference when they were fired, I predicted that we'd go 40-15 in the next 55 games, or I would quit. And a lot of people in New York and a lot of the media in New York were going to hold my feet to the fire. And so after a few games that we won after that proclamation, this thing happened in extra innings. And when I went up to the dugout into the clubhouse after getting thrown out, a couple of my players came out and said, hey, the coaches don't even know who's in the bullpen. You got to go out and win this game for us. I said, I can't go out there. They'll crucify me. And they said, well, here, wear these glasses, wear this hat, wear this T-shirt. Yeah, and kind of the rest is history. I guess the mustache was my idea, and that was just taking the stickers that you peel and put underneath your eyes. And I took one sticker and I put it over here. I got another sticker. I put it over here. And Robin Ventura said, oh, they'll never know. And $10,000 later and 3-game suspension, I realized they knew. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was also up to Ventura and Oral Hershiser to protect you. So did you ever get that money back from them? Because they cost you a little bit, failing at their job there.
I was in the dugout. Oral, who was up on the top step, protecting me, so the umpires couldn't see me, and they did a good job at that. The only thing is the third base camera up in the second deck that shot the hitter from that side also shot our dugout and had the angle to come in and see me. And one announcer said, oh, look, there's Bobby Valentine in a disguise. Well, it wasn't a disguise if he knew who I was. So my goodness, yeah, that was an amazing scene. Oh, and then, if you fast forward or Google or if anybody was there in person, the rest of the story is after 54 games, we were 39-15. And the reporter who asked me what we would do in the next 55 games, and I told him we go 40-15, and he said, and what if you don't? I said, I quit. The reporter peeked his head in before the game into my office and said, I hope this is your last game. Meaning if we lost, we wouldn't have made it to 40-15.
Right.
And we won. And we made it to 40-15. And Joe Namath gets a lot of credit for a great prediction, and they won a Super Bowl. That happened to be the greatest prediction ever. I saved my job. I hit it right on the nose, and we made the playoffs.
That is an truly amazing story. Thankfully, I never made any of those predictions when I was with the Rangers. Bobby, on a more somber note, we're coming up on 24 years since 9/11. We were both living in New York at that time. There are great moments in New York sports history. New York is the place where a lot of sports memorable events happen with, of course, Reggie Jackson hitting the 3 home runs on 3 different pitchers in the World Series, and Joe Namath, his histrionics with the Jets. just 10 days after 9/11, you guys the Mets played their first home game, and Mike Piazza hits a 2-run home run in the bottom of the 8th for you guys to win a game 3-2 against Atlanta. Can you tell us your memories of that and what that meant because of coming off of the attack?
Yeah, Neil, you remember and you lived it firsthand. So the times were changing. All of a sudden, there were metal detectors at the ball game and at the airports, and everyone was worried and everyone was scared, and rightfully so. Our nation was attacked by a foreign power, and no one knew what to do and which way to go. And the idea of playing a game in New York 10 days after that horrific attack was quite a crazy idea in some people's minds. But, our commander in chief, who I told you I knew really well, was struggling with the situation as much as anyone. And one of the things he thought would be proper was for baseball to open back up in New York City. And it was up to the Mets to convince the Atlanta Braves to come from their safe haven in Atlanta up to the wild, wild east in New York. And in the last minute, they came up. On the last minute, the fans came out to the ballpark. A ceremony was put together kind of haphazardly, but done extremely well by the city of New York and the New York Mets. And somehow, when all the frowns were in the stands, the superhero came to the plate and hit a home run for the good guys to take over the bad guys, and all the frowns turned upside down, and people were crying and hugging and getting back to normal. And I think that has been distinguished as the moment that kind of turned the tide a little. And there was a lot of healing to be done. The healing is still an ongoing process, but I think that began the healing process that was so needed in our city, of course, but all around our country, because, like I said, those times were changing.
And you also threw out a commemorative pitch along with Joe Torre on one of the anniversaries years later.
Yeah, on the 20th year, 4 years ago, Joe and I came out through a first pitch to the fire commissioner and the police commissioner. And, what our commander in chief said at the time is we will never forget. And, that first pitch in that game and the next game, that will be a commemorative kind of event, is meant to remind people and for us not to forget.
One more thing as we push forward, you've been a philanthropist over time. You were the AD at Sacred Heart University starting in July of 2013, and you seem to have this very big picture outlook on things, as we discussed earlier in Japan. And you also did a fundraiser where you were actually arrested and held for bail. And in order for people to bail you out, they paid money that went towards charity for Special Olympics in Connecticut. Can you describe that event?
Yeah, of the 100 or so charity events that I was either the auctioneer or the guy putting it together, I think that was one of the creative ones, that people who supported the cause got to give a couple bucks to get me out, and bail was set pretty high, and the bail was raised and the money was given and the lives were changed. But, that idea of giving back was instilled, when I was young. My parents always worked at church fair. They didn't have a lot of money, but they gave of their greatest commodity, their time and their love and their energies. And that was passed on to me. Of course, I also played for Tommy Lasorda, who is, a charity man personified. He raised as much money, different charities, as anybody I've ever met. And I tried to follow in his footsteps.
You've also got the two restaurants in Connecticut, the one down in your hometown of Stamford, one up by Windsor Locks, up by Bradley International. And the facility that you're speaking to us from today. The Bobby Valentine Health and Recreation Center, which opened 6 years ago.
Yeah, well, Sacred Heart has the Bobby Valentine Athletic Center there with my name on it. I'm really proud of that. Of course, raised a lot of money for that also. But here in Stamford, the Sports Academy, I started really when I was playing in 77. I had a little school, a baseball school, clinics for kids, teach them the game, teach them life, all that stuff. And that evolved from the 70s into the 2000s, where I opened up a little teaching academy with a few cages, and then expanded to 40,000 square feet, where we have soccer and baseball and lacrosse and life that's taught on a daily basis by a lot of the great people that I've been lucky enough to surround myself with.
Bobby, thank you, first of all, for doing this. I got to be honest with you. You are one of the most interesting people I've ever met. And I say that sincerely. The things that you've done, and that's why we wanted to do this series with people that weren't hockey people necessarily, because you can learn so much when you get outside of your own little capsule, meaning in my case, hockey, and you go and you listen to other people and what they've accomplished. And I had a wonderful night with you in Anaheim with Bill Carroll, our good friend who introduced me to you. And that was a great night. I'll never forget. And this has been a great experience having you talk to us here. And I've learned so much. My partner, as I told you earlier, is a lot more worldly in the world of baseball than I am. Of course, most people are. But thank you so much for coming and spending your time with us and doing this. And it's just been an honor. And I just can't say enough. I hope to see you sometime this year and host you at a hockey game at some point.
Neil, I appreciate it. And Bill Carroll's coming to the game. I got a suite down at Citi Field, and he'll be one of my guests down there today, so I'll give him your love, that's for sure.
Yeah, please do. He's one of the best people ever. Vic knows him too, and he's been great with us and supportive of the podcast.
Cool. Well, you guys, good luck. I appreciate you thinking about me, and take care of you guys.
Thank you, Bobby.
Okay, Vic.
Thanks, Bob.
See you, Neil.
Neil, this is us stepping really out of our comfort zone a little bit and into the realm of celebrity, folks from different sports and whatnot, and such an insightful and a deep guy that Bobby Valentine is, and certainly the responses that we got today and his storytelling was outstanding.
It is, and I sit back and I spent a long night with Bobby at the Angels game there a month or so ago, and I listened to a lot of the stories, but boy, there was more stuff again, and he's just a fascinating sports individual. When I say sports, meaning that of all the sports, Bobby Valentine is a baseball icon, and I just found it very interesting. I learned a lot, and hopefully our listeners learned a lot too, because he is one interesting fella.
And certainly we want to do more of these and get actors, other performers on, and other people from different sports on. But, this franchise is just a start for us, and hopefully in the next week or 10 days, we'll be able to do this again. And a reminder that our summer coolers will be coming up during the 3rd and 4th weeks of August. The tentative drop dates, August 20th, 22nd, 25th, and 27th. So until our next episode of NHL Wraparound, and hope it'll be another celebrity joining us, we'll speak to you then.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.